This is America Daily, bringing you the best in truthful news updates and in-depth reports happening now.
If you really want to understand the policy agenda of the United Nations, the simplest way to look at it is just turn freedom, turn the 10 Commandments, turn it all upside down. So they want policy-making power stripped from the nation state, stripped from local communities, and stripped from the individual and the family, and shifted gradually to international bodies and eventually to the United Nations.
Welcome to America Daily. I'm Vanessa Rios Gomez. Today, we continue our segments on the United Nations. Today's guest has written extensively about the United Nations and its communist roots. We'll discuss the people behind the UN, how the UN is trying to dictate American policy, and why communist countries like China are being put in leadership positions. Here's our America Daily contributor, Timothy Gebhardt, with more.
Today we're joined with Alex Newman, and you have written extensively on the United Nations in many articles for The New American. In your articles, you're very critical of it for many reasons, of which we will get into in a bit. But first, though, could you give us a history of the United Nations and its founding?
Sure. Well, thank you very much for having me on the program. It's a pleasure to be with you. And, the history of the UN actually goes back to before the UN. There had been numerous previous efforts to try to get the world involved in some kind of international organization that would gradually centralize power. And the League of Nations was probably the premier effort prior to the UN. Obviously, the U.S. Senate killed that. And so a coalition, if you will, of globalists and communists and subversives and others created an institution called the Council on Foreign Relations in New York City. This was in 1921. And one of the key goals of this was to get the United States involved in an international organization along the lines of the League of Nations. I mean, obviously, they had to go back to the drawing board. But after World War II, they thought the time was ripe to do that. And so the victorious powers got together. Really the three that mattered were the United States government, the British government, and the Soviet government. And they got together, came together in San Francisco. And these three major powers, and they invited some smaller powers to participate. You can't have an organization if you don't include other powers, but really the leading forces were these three. And once you get rid of Britain, which really played a much more minor role than the U.S. government and the Soviet government in creating the UN, you really end up with the Americans and the Soviets. So they all came together in San Francisco, and obviously you had Stalin running the Soviet Union at that time, one of the worst mass murdering butchers to ever walk on this planet, and he was still relatively popular in the United States. And people hear that today, they're like, what? That's crazy. How horrifying. Well, there had been a lot of propaganda during World War II, right? They painted him as Uncle Joe to the American people because he was ostensibly our ally in World War II. And so we built military factories for him. And they sacrificed a lot of troops in fighting Nazi Germany, which at one time was very, very close with the Soviet Union. In fact, the Hitler regime shared a lot of ideological similarities with the Soviet regime in Moscow. They maybe differed a little bit on the racial quackery, but we need to be clear. Marxist-Leninists have long held that certain people groups would have to be exterminated. They talked about the Scottish Highlanders as an example because they hadn't gone to the capitalist phase yet. The capitalist phase was the precursor to the socialist and the communist. So, they were totally fine with genocide, with exterminating whole people groups, but they didn't have this idea that Hitler had that somehow, the Germanic peoples were the master race and all this. But ideologically, there were many, many similarities. So the Soviets came together with the Americans in San Francisco and a lot of other powers. Stalin's delegation obviously played a lead role. And then the United States, we picked a guy called Alger Hiss to represent it. And I shouldn't say we, because this really was the U.S. government that did this. And Alger Hiss was a very prominent bureaucrat at the State Department, very well known, a lot of troubling things in his background. But the powers at this summit really loved Alger Hiss. In fact, they loved him so much they made him the leader of this whole summit. They made him the first Secretary General of the UN. He became the chairman of the conference that created the UN Charter. He actually took all the delegates down to the Bohemian Grove. It's kind of a secretive meeting that occurs in the redwood forests of Northern California, where basically 2,000 plus, sometimes 2,500 of the world's leading men, typically and it's all men, from government, business, academia, the CEOs, presidents, prime ministers. To give you a sense, every Republican president since the 1920s until Donald Trump has been there. And so Alger Hiss took all these delegates from the UN founding down to this Bohemian Grove where they engage in strange rituals and stuff. It's a rabbit hole if people want to go down. There's plenty of information available about it. Richard Nixon wrote about this in his autobiography. Actually, some of those tapes that came out of his White House, he wasn't quite as kind to the Bohemian Grove as he was in his autobiography, where it was for public consumption. But they went down there. And anyways, long story short, they created the United Nations. We later threw Alger Hiss in prison, by the way, because he was working for Joseph Stalin. So the lead U.S. representative at this conference ended up being a Soviet agent. They created the UN. And even the ones who were never proven to be communists or agents of Joseph Stalin, people like John Foster Dulles, who was one of the founders of the Council on Foreign Relations, very, very prominent. He served different very important roles. He once served as Secretary of State. He wrote in this book, War or Peace, that the purpose of this new UN that they had created was to eventually create a world government. And he thought that the UN Charter would be quite adequate to that task without any significant modifications, that it would have teeth in it. And it was just a matter of time before they could really develop that from the nucleus of the system into being a full-fledged global government. And that's kind of the history of the UN in a nutshell, founded by communists for communists to create a global system that was completely at odds with the Americanist system that Americans lived under at that time. The concept of God-given rights, for example, which is inseparable from America. And our founding fathers, in our Declaration of Independence, literally the document that gave birth to America as an independent nation, they said that it's a self-evident truth that God created us, that he created us equally, and that he endowed us each with inalienable rights. Well, this UN was founded on a totally different premise. And this comes through loud and clear, even in their earliest documents. If you look at the UN Universal Declaration of Human Rights, for example, there is no God that grants you rights. There's government and international agreements that grant you privileges that can be revoked under virtually any pretext, public order, morality, blah, blah, blah. And then they actually tell you explicitly in Article 29 that none of these rights and privileges may be used contrary to the purposes and principles of the United Nations. So completely alien system to what we have in the United States. But you can see why the communists kind of glommed onto this idea, right? How wonderful. We get to, vote ourselves American wealth. We get to vote against America. We get to dictate policy in their nation. And now we're seeing the fruits of that today.
Yeah, and what's interesting about this is not much of this is really known to the public. It's really hard to find information on this. I remember in the 90s when I was growing up, I thought the United Nations was, this noble enterprise. I wanted to be on the United Nations. That was my goal when I was growing up as a kid. I even saw Kofi Annan on Sesame Street, talking about, he was surrounded by these little creatures and they were all wanting to sing the ABCs and they were arguing who would go first. And Kofi Annan said, "Oh, it's no problem. We can all do it together." And, it has this image where it's this peacekeeping force that is trying to solve the world's conflicts. And then you're saying it's basically a front for the Soviet Union and these globalists to push their agenda. So what policies are they pushing here and how are they doing this?
Yeah, it's funny. You and I must have had some similar ideas as children. I also grew up in the 90s, and I also was totally indoctrinated to believe that the UN was the last best hope for mankind. And in fact, I got more heavy dosages of the indoctrination than normal American children would, because I grew up abroad, mostly in international schools. And, I grew up with kids from all over the world. And it was always very heavy on this idea that the UN is the representative body for all mankind and stuff. And it took me years before I finally realized, wait a minute, Robert Mugabe doesn't represent anyone. He's just a mass murdering gangster, thug, genocidal maniac who happened to enslave a country. That doesn't make him a representative of the people of Zimbabwe any more than Castro represents the people of Cuba, or Chavez represents the people of Venezuela, or Mao represented the people of China. Right? These are just bloodthirsty gangsters who happen to have enslaved a nation. So all that didn't hit me until later on. But if you want to know, the types of policies that the UN is pushing, you don't have to speculate. You don't even have to dig all that deep. If you go to the UN's website, for example, or any of the UN's specialized agencies, they're very clear about what they're doing. We just wrote some articles about this in the New American Magazine. We had a 2-part cover story, one where we talked about the UN increasingly trying to dictate to America what kind of policies we need to adopt here. And so I chose a few specific examples because I think that they illustrate the broader problem, but we can go through some of those. So, for example, the state of Alabama and a number of other American states had passed laws in recent months, a lot of them this year, some last year, either regulating or restricting the killing of unborn babies and abortion. And, under our constitutional system of government, the 10th Amendment reserves all powers not granted to the federal government to our state governments. And so, regulating or restricting the killing of babies, that's a state responsibility unless and until we pass a constitutional amendment. The Supreme Court's opinion about what they found in the alleged penumbras of the Constitution notwithstanding. Well, the UN said the U.S. government has an obligation to step in here and make sure that babies can continue to be killed at taxpayer expense and all this. Well, first of all, that's way outside of the UN's purview, but they cite all these international agreements. They like to call them international law now. And so here's the UN telling the U.S. government that our state governments are not allowed to regulate or restrict the killing of born babies. For a lot of Americans, that is deeply offensive. Even if you agree with abortion, that's deeply offensive, right? Why is the dictators club that is the UN going to be dictating abortion policy in the United States? That's crazy. We're quite capable of governing ourselves. Thank you very much. Then on the border issue, we had this massive crisis on our southern border. It's still going on today. Huge amounts of people showing up at the southern border. Some of them encouraged by globalists in the United States. Some of them encouraged by the U.S. government. Some of them encouraged by the Obama administration. Basically get up here and we'll give you asylum, and then we'll start the welfare spigot flowing and all this. And so Donald Trump said, no, we're going to actually enforce U.S. law here. We're going to secure the border. We are going to, stop illegal immigration. We're going to stop this abuse of our asylum process. If you come from Central America and you pass through Mexico, a safe country, before arriving here, you have no right to claim asylum in the United States. And poverty is not a reason to get political asylum. The fact that there's gangs in your country is not a reason to get political asylum. In fact, we have gangs here in America. Thank you very much. You don't get to become a refugee because you have gangsters in your home country. In fact, we have a lot of political gangsters in all of our countries, don't we? So, we can't all be refugees, obviously. And so Trump decided he was going to enforce these things. And again, the UN came out and said, no, you can't do that. International law requires you to let all these people in. It requires you to do this, that, and the other. And again, this is policy that should be within the sovereign sphere of American authorities and really American people, since the American authorities are supposed to answer to the American people. Our Constitution, for example, in the First Amendment protects the right to freedom of speech as one obvious example, right? Well, here you have the UN, and they've been doing this for years, telling us that under international law, the U.S. government has an obligation to restrict certain forms of speech. In fact, to criminalize certain forms of speech. And they've been bullying Japan on this front as well. They say that you're not allowed to have hate speech. And, they point to various international agreements that they've signed. And they say international law requires a ban on hate speech and requires censorship of the internet and all these things. Well, you know what? Hate speech, first of all, is a Soviet concept. It was the Soviet Union that pushed this idea. And of course, they weren't worried about, racism and things like that. What they were really worried about was criticism of communism and totalitarianism. And so they pushed this idea of hate speech into the international sphere. And in America, we're very, very clear. Congress shall make no law restricting the freedom of speech. It's crystal clear, right? And the UN doesn't get to trump our Constitution, no pun intended. Our gun rights, right? Another issue. Our Constitution is very clear on this issue. Shall not be infringed, right? The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Crystal clear. There's no debate about this. Even the Supreme Court could figure this one out, right? Shall not be infringed means shall not be infringed. Well, the UN says international human rights law requires us to implement robust gun control, as the former UN High Commissioner for Human Rights put it, and on and on. These are just some of the examples. Basically, the UN wants to trample our constitutional system of government. Now they're lobbying, for example, for the federal government to criminalize the spanking of children. Right? And again, this is another power that was never delegated to the federal government, regardless of what you think of how parents raise their children. That's within the purview of state governments, not the federal government, certainly not the UN. And yet they want all of these policies implemented. And, we could talk about this for a long time, but if you really want to understand the policy agenda of the United Nations, the simplest way to look at it is just turn freedom, turn the 10 Commandments, turn it all upside down, right? So they want world government. They want authorities increasingly centralized at the regional level, right? Like the European Union, the African Union, Putin's Eurasian Union, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, the Union of South American States. So they want policymaking power stripped from the nation state, stripped from local communities, and stripped from the individual and the family, and shifted gradually to international bodies and eventually to the United Nations. And this is very, very problematic from the perspective of Americans who appreciate freedom, who understand that our rights come from God, not from the UN and not from government. But it's really a dangerous agenda, and they've really come out of the closet now. I expected a lot of this to at least quiet down during the Trump administration, but I concede I was wrong. In fact, they have been just as bold during the Trump administration as they were during the Obama administration in terms of trying to dictate policy to the American people.
Even if a person adheres to the leftist ideology, should they be concerned here? I mean, after all, the UN is pushing an agenda they agree with, right? For leftists, it's party time. The UN is mandating, legalized abortions, open borders, universal health care, and so on. Should they be concerned?
They should be extremely concerned, Timothy. If you look back at the history of communist parties, communist movements, communist dictatorships, one thing that you always find is that these maniacs always, without end up eating each other, right? I mean, who could forget Leon Trotsky, right? One of the key revolutionaries in the Bolshevik takeover of Russia. This is a guy who was funded by key figures on Wall Street. This is a guy who was instrumental in bringing communist slavery to Russia. And how did he end up? Right? Well, he ended up with an axe pick in his head in Mexico City. Right? This is what always happens. I mean, think about how many of his closest people Stalin had executed and tortured. Right? So all these leftists think, woohoo, yay, they're pushing my ideas. I love this. And, stick it in the face of conservatives. They're going to come for you too, you fool. They always do, right? In communist China, they've murdered maybe 100 million people. Plenty of those people who died believed in the same nonsense that you believe in, right? They just, got on the wrong side of some local communist party bureaucrat. And this is always what happens, always, without exception. Every communist government. Think about how many of Mao's closest people ended up liquidated. Think about how many of Lenin's closest people ended up being liquidated, right? The problem with these people who push these ideas at the top levels is they have no sense of morality. They have no sense of human decency. In many cases, they are actually psychopaths, right? They have no feeling of empathy. They have no emotion for the harm, for the damage, for the slaughter that they unleash. And, it's only a matter of time before you end up on the wrong side of these people too. The same thing happened in, National Socialist Germany. People who thought, oh, well, I don't mind this particular policy. Well, hey, guess what? One day you're going to find a policy that you don't agree with, and it might not even be that. You might just, look at somebody the wrong way, and you're going to end up dead too. Your family will be destroyed. Your wealth will be destroyed. Your wealth will be seized. So, leftists, I think you need to do a better job of looking back at history. And even if you believe ideologically that some of these things are okay, that the government ought to decide healthcare decisions for you, or that the government ought to decide, X, Y, Z things for you. Look back in history and look at what has happened in all. And they always come back to the same. Well, this time we're going to do it right. This time it was different because Stalin did it wrong, and Castro did it wrong, and Mugabe did it wrong, and Kim Jong-il did it wrong, Kim Jong-un did it wrong. It's always they did it wrong, right? We're always a few executions away from utopia. And these leftists need to understand that once freedom is gone, you're going to be in big trouble too. And it's going to be incredibly difficult to stop this juggernaut. So I would encourage you to just look back at history. Don't believe what I'm saying. Just look back at the history of communist movements. Look back at the history of these communist parties, these socialist parties, and see what happens. And I think what you'll find will horrify you.
So one of the most damning things about the United Nations, in my opinion, is its willingness to put severe human rights abusers on the UN Human Rights Council. The Obama administration has been actively trying to get the Chinese Communist Party into all these different positions of power within the UN. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, the Communist Chinese takeover of the UN, I think, is really revealing. And it's not a surprise to anybody who's studied the history of the United Nations that communists would end up openly and overtly running it. But if you look at the amount of influence Communist China has amassed within the UN, it is staggering. And it comes through very clearly on the human rights front, right? The UN has two really important human rights apparatus, bodies, if you will. The first one is the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. This position is currently occupied by an actual communist. Her name is Michelle Bachelet. She was the Socialist Party candidate for president, successful in Chile. Now she's involved in this huge scandal where basically communist parties from across Latin America were looting taxpayers to fund communist revolution all over the region. We've written about this very extensively in New American. Michelle Bachelet is right now hiding behind diplomatic immunity. But to give you a sense of just how radical this woman is, consider that she actually defected to the regime in East Germany. When normal people were trying to flee East Germany for their lives, right? They had to build this giant wall to keep all the slaves trapped in there. And if you tried to cross the wall, they would shoot you, right? They would machine gun you with your children if you tried to escape. This is a lady who actually went to East Germany and defected to the East German communist dictatorship. So I think that should give people a sense of how extreme these people are, right? When you defect to a mass murdering communist dictatorship, you should not be running the global human rights apparatus. And yet that's exactly what's happened here. And again, she's very, very closely connected with the Latin American communist network called the Foro de Sao Paulo, which is founded by Fidel Castro, the mass murderer who enslaved Cuba, the Sandinistas, the communist mass murderers who enslaved Nicaragua. You have the FARC in Colombia, the mass murdering communist terrorists, Marxist narco terrorists down there who traffic cocaine and kill women and children and bomb farm roads and things like that. And then you had Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, the Marxist former president of Brazil, who's now sitting in jail for his many, many crimes. So Michelle Bachelet comes out of this world. And so who else would we expect to run the UN human rights apparatus than somebody with this kind of pedigree, right? So that's the first one. Then on the other side, you have the UN Human Rights Council. It used to be the UN Human Rights Commission, but they finally had to shut that one down because it was so embarrassing, right? They literally elected Muammar Gaddafi. I almost feel like an idiot saying it. They elected Muammar Gaddafi to run the UN Human Rights Commission. So after a while, there were so many scandals. It was so corrupt. They finally said, all right, we have to do some rebranding here because this kind of makes us look stupid. So they did. They created the UN Human Rights Council. And again, we have the same problem, right? Venezuela. The mass murdering socialist dictatorship in Venezuela now sits on there. The mass murdering dictatorship in Communist China now sits on there. The Cuban dictatorship sits on there, right? Islamist regime, they sit on there, right? So the idea that these guys are the guardians of human rights, it would almost be funny if it weren't so sick, if it weren't so grotesque. And so what they do, they come together and they sit around and they praise each other for their human rights record, right? China talks about how great Saudi Arabia's record is on women's rights, and Saudi Arabia talks about how great China's record is on human rights, and all the while they got 1 million Muslims right in concentration camps in Western China. Oh, what wonderful human rights record you guys have. Oh, forced abortions. Yeah, that's great. Chopping out organs from political prisoners. Oh, we don't see any of that, right? And then America. Oh, America's the evil one. How dare you respect people's right to keep and bear arms? How dare you allow people to say what they want to say? So this is really, I think, crucial to understanding the UN. It's not just on the human rights front. It's across every single area. So the UN has 15 specialized agencies. And, some of these are rather technical, but they're all very important. They all are very, very influential in world affairs. And China controls almost 1/3 of these now. You have actual members of the Communist Party of China running almost 1/3 of these, 4 out of 15, and they're about to take over 5 out of 15 if they get the UN Office on Drugs and Crime. They've got Andrew Yang, who's running for that, or is Andy Tsang, I think is his name, running for that position now and looks like the likely candidate. Then you have a communist Chinese agent, Hao Linzhao, who runs the International Telecommunications Union. This is the one that the UN is grooming to become the regulator, the censor, and the tax agent of the internet, right? And he was asked when he took his position, so, you guys have all this censorship in China, is that okay? Well, the censorship's just in the eye of the beholder, right? We don't think it's censorship. And so that gives you a sense, right? They run the International Civil Aviation Organization. They run the UNO, the UN Industrial Development Organization. So they run all these international organizations. They're on the UN Security Council. And yet Americans continue naively funding between 1/4 and 1/3 of the budget of this UN monstrosity. All the while it's working against our interests. It's working against freedom, and it's working to enslave humanity and legitimize the enslavement of peoples all over the world. It's simply grotesque. And if you really want to know how sick it is, just look at the influence of communist China. And for some perspective, the U.S. government has one person running one of these 15 UN specialized agents, and it's a useless one, right? It's one that nobody even thinks about. So it gives you a sense of how serious this issue has become and how great the threat is.
One last question here. So as I was saying with the United Nations earlier, as it's being portrayed in our media, it has this fluffy bunny rabbit image to it as these indispensable international peacekeepers and mediators. It's the media like CNN and MSNBC, who are basically an extension of communist propaganda and the education system, helping to create a positive image of the UN. And this is all in spite of what we just talked about.
That's a great question. And I think, the media is obviously in the tank for the United Nations. In fact, the UN actually provides grants and subsidies and funding for all kinds of media outlets all over the world, in cooperation with some of these mega tax exempt foundations and all this, to provide positive coverage for the UN. Ted Turner, the guy who founded CNN, has been in bed with the UN all along, right? He was the boss of the foundation, gave all kinds of money. So the media is by and large controlled by globalists who love the UN. And that's a significant problem. An even bigger problem, I think, is on the education front. This is their real secret weapon. And it's actually not even secret. In fact, if you go to, we talked about Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030. These are two good examples. Agenda 21 tells you in chapter 36 that the crucial tool to bring about their vision for the world is going to be education, right? They say education is going to be indispensable for changing people's values on these issues, right? If you go to Agenda 2030, the one that was signed in 2015, the entire goal number 4, 17 goals, right? Sustainable development goals. The entire goal number 4 is dedicated to education. And they say that by 2030, every child, every learner, in fact, needs to be so brainwashed, and they don't use the term, but it's clear what they're talking about, needs to be so brainwashed that they just passively accept and submit to this crazy totalitarian ideology of sustainable development, but they'll actively promote it, is what it says. And they'll promote the UN's vision of human rights, and they'll promote the UN's vision of gender equality, which is really, radical feminism, destroy the family, all this kind of crazy stuff. And they're telling us that education is their crucial weapon in this battle. In fact, in a talk that I give on education, I've given it now, I think, 80 times all across the United States and even abroad. I show videos that the UN itself has put out talking about how the education of children is the way that they're going to implement all of this. They know that older generations of Americans who still believe in freedom, who still believe in God, who still believe in gun rights and free speech are never going to accept all this, right? We're not going to give up our ranches and our children and our guns and our free speech. So they know the way they're going to succeed, if they're going to succeed, is by brainwashing the children. Hitler understood this. Stalin understood this. Mao understood this. Every totalitarian of the last 100 years has understood that their agenda sinks or succeeds based on the indoctrination of future generations. And so that's what the UN is doing. They are coming for your children. If you want to be able to live a life in freedom, if you want your children and your grandchildren to live in freedom, you have got to protect your children from the UN's indoctrination. They've got a whole UN agency now dedicated to this. It's called UNESCO. And they've been very, very open about the fact that they're brainwashing children around the world to believe in globalism and humanism and socialism and all the rest of it. In fact, they've never even really bothered to hide this until very recently. You had an actual member of the Communist Party running UNESCO. This was until last year. You had Irina Bokova, who served the mass murdering Bulgarian regime. They slaughtered about 250,000 people out of a population of 7 million. So who else would you choose to run the UN's education agency, right? Very, very dangerous. And, the media is a big part of the problem, but an even bigger problem is the hijacking of our education system by these UN agencies, using our own tax dollars to build slavery into the minds of our children.
Join us next time as we go further in depth on the UN's Agenda 21, the plan to control all land use and take away people's individual rights. It may already be implemented in your area, so join us and find out what that means for you. Once again, I'm Vanessa Rios Gomez. Thanks for listening.
This is America Daily, bringing you the best in truthful news updates and in-depth reports happening now.